Welcome back. Hope you're all enjoying a wonderful, exciting Friday afternoon. My name is Krista Landgraf, and I serve as president for the California Association for the Gifted.
Oops, so sorry. I just missed my place there. My name is Karen Martin, and I serve as the at-large representative for the California Association for the Gifted. Sorry about that.
That's okay. If during the course of this session you have questions, you have comments you want to make, go ahead and utilize that chat box at the bottom of your screen. Julia will be more than happy to interact with you during the session. If not, go ahead and put questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end of the session.
All right, and be a part of CAG by becoming a member today as an individual or a school site. Sign up at cagifted.org by clicking on membership. This session will last from 2 to 2:50 p.m. today, and the next session will begin at 3 o'clock using the same link that you used to log into this session.
And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Julia Nyberg is a professor at Purdue University Global in the Department of Education. Dr. Nyberg was a K-6 classroom teacher and professional development expert in the United States and Asia before entering higher education. Dr. Nyberg's research focuses on curriculum and instructional design, artificial intelligence pedagogies, gifted and talented students, and curriculum strategies to value, integrate, and culturally sustain populations who have been marginalized in education. Dr. Nyberg speaks at state and national conferences and provides demonstration lessons for school districts related to her expertise in curriculum design, artificial intelligence pedagogies, and differentiated instruction. Dr. Nyberg has served as a lead for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Curriculum Guide and the Artificial Intelligence Curriculum Guide for Purdue University Global. Dr. Nyberg is the co-developer of the Home and Community Connections Model, an instructional strategy that integrates the student's family and community into the curriculum. Dr. Nyberg serves on various professional organizations, including the California Association for the Gifted. Take it away, Dr. Nyberg.
Thank you both for that warm introduction. It's always so strange to be in this position where, I'm flipping roles in the midst of it and I hear people actually introduce me. Funny. Okay, go ahead and tell me in the chat what grade level you teach. Let's get this party started. What grade level do you all teach? 6th, 4th, 3rd? Ooh, kinder. Some people are K-6, dual immersion, university teacher prep, 6th grade in middle school, 8th grade. TOSA, yes. I want to give a shout out to the TOSAs in the room. The last grade level that I taught was 6th grade. And I was in Ontario Montclair Unified School District. And I was in a classroom with 33 identified gifted students. That was a lot of students who are gifted. I just got to that place where I called them my colleagues and they taught me. So that kind of anchors you all in terms of my classroom experience. Today, during this conversation, we're going to have an interactive conversation. So please engage in the chat and the conversation with me as we progress. We're going to be discussing the content imperatives. And the reason why I chose to discuss the content imperatives with you all today is because a lot of you are active classroom teachers. And this is one of the strategies that I used in the classroom that I would say was probably the most frequent instructional strategy that I was using. I had a lot of fun with the content imperatives. And I also know that a lot of people have not discussed the content imperatives at GATE conferences recently. So I wanted to reinvigorate them and also give credit to the work done by Dr. Sandra Kaplan and the fact that her development of the content imperatives is really instrumental in terms of our instruction when we're in the classroom as teachers. So the first thing I'm going to have you all do is I'm going to ask you to develop, if you can develop 6, great. If less than that, that's fine. Develop a few questions related to a topic that you are teaching. So what are some questions related to a topic that you are teaching? Go ahead and drop them in the chat. It can be any questions at all related to any topic that you're teaching. And you all know the teacher in me is going to chart these. What is a theme? What else? What are questions related to topics that you're teaching? What is STEM? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste some of these from the chat. How does the idea of power impact our understanding of ancient civilizations? Can I make the slide bigger? Yes, I can. Hold on one moment. What text can you find to support your answer about blank's character? I will make it bigger, just one moment. What does a plant cell do in order to maintain homeostasis when exposed to environments with inclement weather? I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit smaller so you all can see it. Where do you see fractions in real life? Oh, that's a fun question. Copy paste it from here, bring it over to here. Where do we see fractions? We're going to use these questions throughout the presentation. How does this relate to your life, right? Why does I always used to say to my 6th graders, what's the point? Who cares? Right? If you can't make that connection with what I'm teaching, then does it really matter? Does this really matter? How do the authors convey their purpose in informational or literary texts? That's that good old vertical standard on author's purpose. Sometimes when I copy and paste from the chat, it doesn't want to copy paste and it's a little bit difficult. So I have to try it a few times. There we go. What message is the author illustrating throughout the story? Let's grab that one, put it here. What are 2 short-term causes of World War II? Let's grab that one and put it in here. These are great questions. How do animals adapt to change? Okay, it's at the point now where I'm running out of room on my circle map. Oh no. Oh no. What is a real life example of a positive feedback loop? That's a fun question. I like thinking about that question, especially because I don't know the answer. Like I'm really, that's probably going to stick with me for a few moments here, maybe a few days. I'm going to have to look for positive feedback loops in life. Okay, let me just move these over. Let me get this power, impact, lots of spelling mistakes question over here. Okay, and because of the size of my circle map and because you all are really good at generating questions, I am going to go ahead and pause with my addition to the screen because I don't have any space. And let me respond to that request for me to make the slide larger. And so hopefully you all will be able to see it just a wee bit better. Okay, the slide is larger officially. Okay, so what's so interesting about this is developing questions is something we do a lot as teachers. We spend the majority of our time instructionally asking questions. And one thing that I realized as a teacher was that the questions that we ask are very critical in terms of not only generating understanding, but also perpetuating future questions. And I always go back to this idea of NASA. If you step onto NASA's campus, one thing you realize very quickly is that the individuals at NASA are constantly asking questions. And those questions may not have answers. That's very different from the instructional space that we foster in K-12 environments, because a lot of the questions we ask have answers, or there's the expectation that there's that social expectation that we're going to ask questions that have answers. And I think for me as an educator, this is where the content imperatives come into play. And I want to give a lot of emphasis during this presentation that this is the work of Dr. Sandra Kaplan. The content imperatives are not something that I developed. I am simply leaning on the shoulders of giants during this presentation when sharing with you information regarding the content imperatives. And the content imperatives, for me, when I first learned about the content imperatives, I felt like, as a learner myself, that I had been deprived educationally and I was stuck in the desert dying of thirst because I never received the content imperatives to facilitate my understanding and digestion of intellectual content. And therefore, I would like to suggest that the content imperatives are just that. They are imperative for intellectual development and our understanding of knowledge, and not just the understanding that we have of knowledge, but the understanding of knowledge comes with our interaction with knowledge. And the fact that one of the critical components of that interaction is to ask questions that we don't necessarily have the answers to. So, that being said, that shifts the landscape in the classroom tremendously, because the test and the assessment seeks answers. And if we say that an imperative of our interaction with knowledge development is to develop questions that don't necessarily have answers, then that changes our relationship with assessment, that changes our relationship with this concept of mastery, that changes our relationship with the pursuit of intellectualism and having, finite definitive answers. So that being said, I'm going to tell you all a little story. One of the first times I arrived in Asia to teach, I went to the headmaster of the school and I said to the headmaster, "Where can I find the copy machine?" Right? I was a teacher in Los Angeles Unified School District at a Title I school site. And I had a great teacher's lounge with lots of copy machines. And I was used to using copy machines as a means to facilitate understanding. Lots of translation occurred. And the headmaster came back to me and said, "We do not have a copy machine. But what I can give you is a ream of white paper." And what my students could do with a blank piece of paper was far beyond anything that I could anticipate in my instruction in the United States. I learned the power behind a blank piece of paper and the power of organizing content behind a blank piece of paper. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to encourage everyone to grab a blank piece of paper. On your blank piece of paper, you can organize your blank piece of paper this way for the process of taking notes. On the left-hand side, you can note the visual representation of the prompt, which we refer to as the icon. That's just a visual representation of it. Next to that, you can note the name of the content imperative. Following that, you can write your own description, because I feel that if you write your own description, it will have more meaning for you than me providing a description for you. Yes, I'm a mean teacher. And then finally, on the right-hand side, if you so please, you can make connections to depth and complexity. Now, is this the way you have to organize your blank piece of paper? No, absolutely not. It is just one idea of many in which I'm sure you can generate for the process of taking notes during this session. Yes, there is a reason why they also call me Dr. Nyberg, because I'm the meanest teacher this side of the Mississippi, and I do mean things like make you take notes on blank pieces of paper. You're welcome. The content imperatives are really interesting in terms of their facilitation, because they allow you to expand your capacity as an educator. So your conversation is not just isolated on the topic at hand. You're able to approach the topic now from a variety of different angles, a variety of different perspectives, and you're also able to allow for collaboration around the topic that provides that catalyst for asking those questions that we don't necessarily have the answers to. And what we can do during this presentation is we can connect all of these questions that you generated to the content imperatives. And we can continue to expand these questions and elaborate on these questions in ways that transform the questions from perhaps just being factual questions to analytical questions or evaluative questions that continue to expand them in ways that give you a deeper understanding of the content. And one could argue that imperative understanding of the content. So one of the first questions that I would like to focus on is one of the first questions that you all asked. And I'm not sure if you were the person in the chat who asked this question, go ahead and tell us you were the person. What is a theme? We're going to look at what is a theme first for our question. Who is the owner of this question? What is a theme? Who is the person who asked this question? Jonna, thank you so much for asking this question. What is a theme? We're going to connect this question, what is a theme, to this idea of origin. Origin is a content imperative. I could ask my learners not only the question, what is a theme, but I could also ask my learners, what is the origin of theme? When we're talking about literary analysis and how we deconstruct text, what's the origin of theme? What were the first conversations around theme? Who was the scholar who introduced this idea of theme in terms of literary analysis? Is that a relatively new idea, or is that something that dates back to perhaps the Greeks or the Romans or someone else? What is the origin of theme? When did scholars start talking about theme? So suddenly I've taken this question, what is a theme, right? And of course, I could get a very factual answer in regards to that question, what is a theme? And I've now connected it to origin. and I'm looking at the origin of theme in terms of literary analysis. Origin, defined, is the beginning or root or source of an idea or an event. Notice how I took that factual question, what is a theme? And I connected it to the idea of origin. So I'm looking at the origin of the conversation around theme in literary analysis. Now, this is really interesting because this gets me into a space as an educator where I don't necessarily know the answer to that question. Would I have to do some research? Absolutely. Do I even know if there's an answer? I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. You all just develop these questions just right now. I don't know if there's an answer to that question. I don't know if I can track the origin of theme, but oh my goodness, it gets me thinking, and it's a really juicy question that causes me to wonder, causes me to be curious. And it's one of those questions that, we as adults can sit around and research and think about. And if I knew the answer to the origin of theme and when that conversation began in literary analysis, well, gosh, that would be a great cocktail party trick, right? Now, the great thing about the content imperatives is that I would often kind of anchor my instruction with the content imperatives. And then from the content imperatives, I would also interlace the prompts of depth and complexity. So I viewed the content imperatives as, I want to say, I viewed the content imperatives as the overall dish, right? Whereas the prompts of depth and complexity were kind of like the flavors that I would add to the dish, the seasoning. Here's how that would function. So I could say to my students, going back to that question on theme, what is the origin of theme? What unanswered questions do you have related to the origin of theme in literary analysis? And I could also say, well, how has the concept of the theme changed over time? What are the trends associated with thematic analysis in text? And I could link that back to that original question that I had that Jonna developed. What is a theme, right? What trends have occurred with theme since its origin? Was that something that was continually discussed by literary analysis, or was that something that perhaps increased in terms of our literary analysis? Was theme something that perhaps surfaced related to ancient civilizations? Did the idea of theme and conversations around theme, well, how is that recorded in terms of how scholars captured ideas around theme? Now, this is all fine and dandy to link the content imperatives and the prompts of depth and complexity, but I would also suggest to you as educators that there's another way that we can examine the content imperatives into our instruction. And that is by layering in creative thinking. So if we look at the creative thinking skill to add to, what could we add to our conversation in terms of the origins of theme? Could we also look at the origins of theme and author's purpose? Could we also look at the origins of theme and perhaps the idea of human migration? Did conversations around theme and the origins of theme transfer with human migration? That's something I could add to this conversation on theme and origins. Now, you all know I'm just doing this off the seat of my pants, based on our conversation, our topics that we developed, questions related to. I'm sure that you all have much more sophisticated questions that you could connect to origin, and unanswered questions and trends, and the creative thinking skill of adding to. Let's go ahead and continue to expand on your questions. What are some questions that you have now that you could use in your instruction related to origin? I'm going to open up the chat for all of you to contribute questions related to origin. And I can get us started by taking one of our questions and modifying it to add origin. So for example, I'm going to take this question, where do you see fractions in real life? I'm going to take it here. I'm going to copy paste it here, but I'm going to add the word origins in it. Where is the origin of seeing fractions in real life? And here's another one from Karen. Thank you, Karen, in the chat. What is the origin of conflict between two characters? So that would go into English language arts. I'm going to capitalize origin because I really want to emphasize the fact that we're including the content imperative prompt in the question. Okay, and a person is giving us an answer and they're saying cooking, right? Thank you for providing that question. What are other questions in science and social study that use origin that we can ask our students? Here's another one for science. And I'm going to capitalize origin again, just to emphasize, what is the origin of the idea behind the water cycle? Here's another one for ELA. What is the origin for the internal-external struggle of a character? What else? What else can we do? What about for social studies? I recall earlier there's a question on World War II. What is the origin? Oh, here's a good one. Origin of the beginning of civilization. What's the origin of evidence of erosion in a particular situation? So one thing that's key about this is I'm using the content imperative directly in the question. And that way my students know every single time I'm using that content imperative directly in the question, they know what it means. Another way that we can do this, and we kind of did it in this question, what is the origin or the beginning of a civilization? So we go ahead and define it in the question that way, and that provides additional support to our learners. And here are some more social studies questions. Let's go ahead and add these here. What's the origin of conflict between states? What's the origin of the circumstances for World War II? What's the origin of hierarchy? Woohoo! And it was so interesting. I want to bring us back to this idea. Some of these questions we don't necessarily have answers to. We don't know the answers ourselves as adults in the room. That's okay. Ultimately, what we want to, what's the origin of tariffs? That's a great question. We want to get our students to this place where we are not the only ones asking the questions. Our students are also able to ask the questions. Okay. We want our students to take ownership of things such as the content imperatives, so they feel empowered to ask questions, and they feel empowered to ask questions that don't necessarily have answers. That's okay. That's part of the process of asking questions. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next content imperative. Are you ready? I'm going to pull another question for this one. Let's look at our questions. I'm going to pull this one. What's a real life example of a positive feedback loop? Can someone tell me in the chat who asked this question? What is a real life example of a positive feedback loop? Thank you, Talon, for asking this question. What's a real life example of a positive feedback loop? Talon, what content standard does this connect to? What content area? And what grade level? High school life science. Guess what, folks? I've never taught high school life science, but here's how this question can function. Contributions. I can take the content imperative contributions, and I can look at what are the contributions to a positive feedback loop. What contributes to a positive feedback loop? That's something I don't even know the answer to. Talon probably knows the answer to that question, but Julia does not. But do you see how it expands the questions? So I'm not only looking for that real life example of a positive feedback loop, but I'm also looking for the contributions to a positive feedback loop. Contributions can be defined as a significant part or result of an idea or an event. So in this case, I could take this idea of a positive feedback loop and what contributes to it. And I could expand this further by connecting the prompts of depth and complexity, by saying, do the factors that lead to the contributions of a positive feedback loop change based on your perspective in a habitat? Because I noticed that this is life science, right? Are there rules that govern the contributions to a positive feedback loop? And lastly, do the contributions to a positive feedback loop change over time? Now, once again, I may not have the answers to these questions, but they prompt this intellectual conversation that expands that topic, positive feedback loops, in a way that I, as an educator, didn't necessarily anticipate, right? It's certainly much more interesting for me to teach. So, why wouldn't I provide that opportunity for my students? Does it make your class an easy class to be in? No. Because students have been through the K-12 system year after year after year in an environment where they're conditioned to provide the right answers. So all of a sudden, you'll sit there and you'll be asking these questions. And wait, I got it right there. I have to put it in my bag for yesterday because you'll be asking these questions and you'll get, did you all hear that? Tell me in the chat if you heard that. Did you hear my crickets? Oh no, it was the sound of silence. It was the sound of crickets. It was supposed to be the sound of crickets. It was actual crickets. Yeah, anyways, that's a fail when you're presenting online. Okay, now if I'm adding my creative thinking to it, I could say, okay, what are the contributions that lead to positive feedback loops? What could I add to or contribute to a positive feedback loop? How can I modify the contributions that lead to a positive feedback loop to produce something different? So all of a sudden, I'm combining creative thinking with the content imperatives, and all of a sudden, that conversation around positive feedback loops in my life science class in high school is now doing this dance with creative thinking. Let's go ahead and get your ideas for questions you could ask using contributions. What are questions you could ask using contributions across the content areas? Do 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 do. You're all frantically typing, I can tell. Ooh, what math has contributed to the formation of video games? I'm just going to bold that because we want to make sure that the content imperative is in the question itself. What contributions did the narrator add or detract from this chapter? Absolutely. What are the contributing factors to climate change? We hear that question being asked often, right? What were the contributions to the Mayan Empire? What idea has this author contributed to our knowledge of living in a dystopian society? Ooh, you all are on fire. Okay. How does the time period of the story contribute to the treatment of the characters by others? Oh, this is a great question for social studies. What were the contributions of women to the Revolutionary War? What contributions of our understanding of science changed our total understanding? That's really interesting. And, I really like how that question contributes to multiple perspectives, right? How does that vary based on your perspective? What do the captions contribute to the photograph? I'm going to add that here to ELA. So we can see here that you're inserting contributions, and you can even imagine how some of these questions can continue to expand by adding in those prompts of depth and complexity as well. So here's another one for science. How does climate warming contribute to weather patterns? I'm going to highlight patterns there too, because that's a prompt of depth and complexity. Okay, so we see how across the disciplines, and I like how a lot of these questions that you are all developing are really flexible in that you can use them across any grade level. Here's another one. How does a character's motive add to the total understanding of theme in the novel? Yes. So, my English language arts is getting pretty big here. I have to make this a little bit smaller so you all can see it. Oh, but that's way too small. There you go. Okay, that motive, add to, I'm going to add or contribute to the total understanding of theme in the novel. And then here's another one for social studies. How do this country's contributions create a better life for its people? Okay, let's go on. Let's meet another content imperative. We have, of course, parallel. Parallel, I'm going to use with another question that you all created. Let's pull one. Okay, so let's pull this one. What are two short-term causes of World War II? Now, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that so you can see it. We're going to pull this question. Who asked this question? What are the two short-term causes of World War II? Julie, thank you so much for asking this question. So Julie asked her social studies course, her high school social studies course, what are the two causes of World War II? Julie could expand on that by saying, what is a parallel in another event that had a similar cause to World War II? Julie could take the event of World War II and look for a parallel event that had similar causes that contributed to it. Parallel is defined by an event that is similar and can be compared to one another. We could continue the conversation by saying, what are the details that reinforce World War II as a parallel event to this other event in history? We could reinforce this further by saying, what patterns reinforce the parallel between World War II and this other event in history? Okay. Furthermore, we could add in creative thinking to this. We could say, okay, well, we have a parallel event to World War II that details reinforce this idea that both events had similar causes. How would you add to your analysis of these parallel events? What components from these events, World War II and another event, would you modify to make the impact from the wars different? Is there anything from World War II or this parallel event that you would substitute because it was not ethical? So you can see that creative thinking allows the students in this case to manipulate the parallel events and effectively manipulate history to kind of rewrite the fact that, yes, these events as historically presented are parallel, but we could certainly engage our creative thinking skills to either add to, modify, or substitute within these events. And you all know where I'm going with this because you're already doing it in the chat. Thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is saying, how did the arms race of the Cold War parallel to World War II? So we're going to go ahead and put that here. I'm going to bold the use of the term parallel because that is our content imperative. What other questions can you develop using the content imperative parallel? What other questions can you develop? Elizabeth got us started. Don't leave Elizabeth alone. Here's another one. Oh, you're all on fire right now in terms of social studies. What parallels can you see between the ancient Kush and Mesopotamia? Absolutely. Good old ancient Civ, 6th grade teachers, unite. Here we are. What about in math, science, and English language arts? What characters in the novel are parallel to real world characters? You've got it. How did the way the main character's boss treat her parallel the way the mother treated her son in the stories we read? Yes, looking for parallel character development. How do animal habitats parallel each other? Absolutely. What parallels do you see between the area of triangles and the area of other shapes like rectangles? Is there a parallel that you can find between physics and geometry? Absolutely. Now, for me, this is a great way that I brainstorm during the summer. I look at my content imperatives, I make charts just like this across the disciplines, and I look at my content standards. And I just develop these questions off the cuff to connect my content standards to the content imperatives. And I do a similar brainstorming during the summer. Here's another one for ELA. What are the parallels between different books by the same authors? What are the parallels do you find between the gold rush and cryptocurrency? Woo! You all are on fire. Okay, let's look at the next one. Are you ready? Oh, I'm going to grab this one because we're talking about communism. Okay, what parallels do you find between two communist countries? Are you ready? Are you ready? The next one is paradox. Paradox. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let's pull a question. One of your questions. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to pull this question here. Whose question was this? What message is the author illustrating through the story? Whose question is this? What message is the author illustrating through the story? Let's pull that question and use it with paradox. Yes, it may have been Elizabeth's. Thank you, Elizabeth. We think it is yours. Okay, I'll agree with you. I don't know though. Okay, that question, what message is the author illustrating through the story? This is a question that could be used all the way from kindergarten all the way up, right? Because it connects to that vertical standard author's purpose. And we talk about author's purpose a lot in English language arts across grade levels. But what about looking at it in relationship to a paradox? What is a paradox that another author suggests in relationship to this story? So all of a sudden, I'm looking at author's purpose, not just between one text, but between two. And I could look at both of the author's purpose, and I could look for a paradox between those authors' purposes. Now, as Carol points out in the chat, and I think this is critical, is I often use the term paradoxical as well. And Carol says, how are the characters' words paradoxical to their actions? Absolutely. So instead of just using paradox, I also use paradoxical with my students as well. Paradox is officially defined as the contradictory elements in an event or idea. We could expand paradox by using the content imperatives, by saying what details reinforce the fact that this is a paradox. How does this paradox define multiple perspectives? And what are the ethical issues associated with the paradoxical perspective of these authors? Note that I used 2 prompts of depth and complexity there. I got real fancy. We could also include creative thinking with this. We could say, okay, well, what would you add to the story to reinforce the paradox between these 2 characters? What could you modify from that character's point of view that would redefine the paradox? How could you substitute an action that occurred in this story to shift the paradox that's presented? And how would you combine this story with another to present a different paradox? Now, you all are on fire. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but this is just on fire because you're already adding these questions. For ELA, we have how are the characters' words paradoxical to their actions? In ELA, we also have the paradox of Animal Farm's characters and leaders from the Russian Revolution. We also have, I almost want to put this in social studies because I'm thinking it from a sociological perspective. The paradox of AI developers warning us against the dangers of AI. Where can you find the paradoxes in prison? I'm also going to add that to social studies because we're thinking about it from a sociological perspective. How is the character a paradox? Another for ELA. Give me some science and math, folks. Come on, we can't leave science and math hanging here. Is there a paradox between the characters' youthful perspectives and their later view? I'm going to bold paradox, and I'm also going to bold perspective here because this is one of those instances where we are using a prompt of depth and complexity and a content imperative. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep on rolling. We're just going to neglect math and science completely. But you all know I want you to think of math and science questions for our next one, because we certainly cannot forget about math and science in our instructional conversations. Last but not least, gee, oh no, we can't, we can't forget these. Oh, they're all coming all at once. You all hit entered on your, okay, I'm adding them quickly. I'm copy pasting as quickly as my little fingers can move. Okay, what's the bigger denominator in the smaller piece? Is that a paradox? Ooh, that's a really fun question. I feel guilty because I never asked that when I taught 5th and 6th grade. Okay, the paradox of climate change, and they're removing the incentive of electric vehicles. No kidding, right? Is there a paradox between conservation and global warming? Yes, we have these math and science questions. And as Elizabeth says, yes, there should be Jeopardy. All teachers have to participate. And these are fun questions because you know what? I don't know the answers to them. They may not have answers, but oh, they're delicious in that they make us intellectually hungry, don't they? Next up, convergence. Last but not least, we have convergence. Let's go back to your questions and pull a question that connects to convergence. Okay, we're going to pull this question. What text can you find to support your answer about blank character? Whose question was this? What text can you find to support your answer about blank's character? Carol, thank you so much, Carol. Carol, we could ask our students, what are the converging factors that support blank's character in making that decision? Because convergence is defined as a meeting point of the elements that describe an event or an idea. So we could look at the converging factors that resulted in perhaps a character's action in the story. We could reinforce this by looking at the details that supported the convergence of actions that resulted in that character's decision. We could look at the patterns that have occurred in the plot that converge to result in that plot climax. Convergence, as you all can imagine, and you're starting to do so in the chat, this can be applied across disciplines. What are the converging factors that help start World War II? Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for getting us started. How else could we connect this across disciplines? What questions could you develop using convergence for math, science, and English language arts? What events converged to kick off the Revolutionary War? Absolutely. What are the converging facts that caused the recent wildfires? I'm going to put that over in science. A personal question, right? Yes. What else? What can you ask in math related to convergence? I gave you my example using English language arts. Can you expand on it? What converging factors inspired the westward movement? Yes, absolutely. What are the converging factors that help students understand multi-step word problems? That's a question we don't know the answer to, right? What converging survival elements help animals in various biomes? What are the converging constraints? Ooh, I like that, converging constraints. That is interesting, that lead to the base 10 system. Is there a convergence of steps needed to solve math problems? Yes. What types of math converge to build a house? Yeah, I mean, that's a question I don't even have an answer to, folks. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to do some research. I'm going to drop that down to 30 so you can all see it. What are the converging factors that led to the Renaissance? Is there a limit where the function will converge? Yes, another fun math question. Oh, geez. Cheryl, I have to laugh. What are the converging factors that led to the main character having no friends? Ooh, for kinder. How do the convergence of letters and words translate into a story? Ooh, that's a juicy question for lower grades. How does the convergence of different parts of speech lead to a sentence? Yes. Okay, thank you all so much for engaging in this conversation with me regarding the content imperatives. I know you're still writing questions, but for the sake of time, we have to come to a close. If you have a question that you don't know the answer to, or that has no answer at all, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can email me at contact@drjulianyberg.com, or you can connect with me on social media at Dr. Julia Nyberg on LinkedIn, X, or Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me, and we are going to transition to our next speaker. Close us out.
Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful, super engaging. And I just want to thank you all for attending this webinar session featuring Julia Nyberg. Your certificate of participation will be emailed to you 1 week after the last day of the event. The next session will begin promptly at 3 o'clock. That's just 3 minutes. Using the same link that you used to log into this session, tag us at CA Gifted on Instagram, X, or Facebook. We would love to see you on social media. And we're excited for our last session. And so I'll let those people who are going to introduce our next speaker join in. Thank you so much.